Hello and welcome to the Blank Podcast, the podcast where we delve into those frustrating moments of some well-known people. I'm Jim Daly, and I'm joined by my friend, Giles Paley-Phillips. How's that? Is that okay?
When you say my friend, it sounds like I might be the only one.
My one friend.
Yeah, my friend.
I'm looking at you, hoping like we are friends, aren't we? Come on, nod.
Yeah, I guess so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, very much so. How are you doing, Jim?
I'm good. I'm really good. Yeah,
it's another bright sunny day.
It is a bright sunny day.
It's actually getting warm as well. I think spring is.
It's about time. It feels like it's been forever.
Although it's not been that bad a winter, is it?
I'm not
I mean, it's
good
been a bit
cold.
frosty, but I don't think it's been particularly. You don't like the cold?
I just don't. No, I just don't like it at all.
I quite like the in-between seasons. I like spring and autumn when you don't have to get too layered up.
Spring,
but it's not too.
I struggle with layers. I always wear too many layers or the wrong coat or whatever. But I like spring because it feels like something's happening. Summer's coming, new starts, and it feels almost aspirational. Yeah,
and I keep seeing lots of flowers sort of popping up, crocuses and stuff. So it's been very pretty around my way at the moment. So
yeah, same.
Yeah.
Good. Anyway,
we've utterly dull start to the podcast.
No, I think it's lovely. We've got an incredible guest. I mean, they're all incredible, but we've got a particularly incredible guest.
Yeah, and I'm just a huge fan of our guest today. It is Mark Gatiss.
It is indeed.
Who has incredibly prolific career.
Yeah.
Obviously, his work on The League of Gentlemen with Reece Shearsmith and Steve Bemerton, and then his writing. He's obviously written Sherlock and starred in it.
Yeah.
And he is doing a new Dracula show with the BBC and Netflix.
Doctor Who.
Yeah, and just so many other things. He does painting. He just keeps himself busy. And just fascinating guy and a lovely guy.
Yeah,
a lovely guy. And I've got to know a lot of our guests through social media, and they've been very kind to come on. And Mark's one of those that I just sort of got in contact and said, please come on our podcast, and he was very dutiful and
a great guest.
Yeah,
very open, very honest, and fascinating man who's done so much stuff. So it's just, again, lovely to spend time in these people's presence for a bit and hear how their brain ticks and how they work
and how he deals with those sort of blank times when he's working on all these different projects and how he uses those other things to get out of those blank moments.
Exactly. Well, I think we should dive straight in.
So
this is Mark Gatiss on the Blank Podcast.
Mark Gatiss, welcome to the Blank Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Nice to be here. Swanky. It's like a Bond lair.
It is a bit like a Bond lair, and I feel like Blofeld. I haven't got a cat though. That's not the only thing that's missing.
If this is Bond lairs, then I want to be in more Bond lairs. This is lovely.
Yeah, supervillains have it quite easy, really, don't they?
Well, they've got the money. You see.
Yeah, they are. Yeah,
I always wonder about those plans. In any given, not just Bond, but any big film like that. It's like there's a lot of money, isn't there? And I know it's from extortion. It's from terrorism, revenge, and extortion. But that's still a lot of money, isn't it?
Yeah.
All those men in boiler suits.
They're all must be on a fairly decent wage.
Good whack.
Yeah.
In fact, Dr. No says, hang on. What's it? No, it might not be Dr. No. What is it? Somebody says, some of my men have recently oh, yes, it's in From Russia with Love.
Yeah.
So Smersh says some of our men have recently defected to Spectre. So there's maybe some sort of,
so
rivalry.
There's better wages than Spectre,
better benefits, holiday pay.
Yeah,
pay.
Maybe they have. Yeah, there's 5 weeks.
Exactly.
Get 5 weeks holiday at Spectre if you make it through.
Which is unlikely, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is.
Exactly.
So they must have that. It must have to be a lot of money to make it worth their while.
Yeah,
sort of danger money.
Insurance must be through the roof as well.
Who's going to do that?
Exactly.
Yeah,
who's going to
insure Dr. No? And
that'd be a nightmare. Premium would be through the roof.
Anyway.
Now, I was doing a bit of research on you, Mark.
We're not. I thought we were here to talk about Spectre. Yes, go on.
Specsavers. And you're originally from County Durham.
Yes, just
right?
come back. Just came
have
back.
Have you? Because I guess I didn't really detect much of an accent.
Do you not?
No. Well, I guess there is a pinch of an accent, maybe. Do you think that's fair? Or is
no, I've never taken any pains to hide it. I certainly
because my father was from County Durham.
Oh, right. Whereabouts?
Crook.
Oh, yeah, I know Crook.
Yeah. And we used to spend summers up there. So every summer we'd have to get the 125 train up from King's Cross, I guess. And then, we'd be going up to Crook for like 2 or 3 weeks. And we'd
I might have seen you. My Auntie Bella. My Auntie Bella lived in Crook.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've been there. They had a little cottage, but with like an acre of land, and they had like horses on it and stuff. But it's a beautiful part of the world.
Yes, well, I was up for my Auntie Mona's funeral yesterday, and she was 92, bless her. But we went back to the house, and I haven't been there for years, and it was a real trip, down memory lane. Just I remember so much about it, and yet I'd reconfigured the house in my memory. Yeah. So it was on the end of the row, and it wasn't sort of second floor and things like that. But it was so small. I mean, I know I was smaller. But I was amazed by how tiny it all seemed, and yet it's so beautiful, idyllic sort of part of the country.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And I think I think similar. That I think I Google mapped the house because I haven't been there for so long. I mean, I think last time I went there was probably about 10 or 11, so it's a long time ago. Long.
10 years.
Yeah, you're very kind. And I Google mapped it, and again, it was very much smaller than I remembered, but it had this beautiful bit of land. Yeah, it is lovely up there. So so I just felt like we had a bit of a connection there, that we had the Durham background. But you were there for a long time, were you? When did you leave?
I left I went to college in 1986, so I was 20 when I left. And I remember that feeling of, when you remember, it's going to have to come when you leave home. You never think it's going to happen. And then it suddenly happens. It was like that for me. I got into a place called Bretton Hall to do a drama degree. And then I was just going. And I remember, weirdly, my Auntie Bella and my mum and dad drove me down to Wakefield on the Sunday night. Or we had Sunday dinner or something. And then we went down, and then I was there, and I just remember suddenly that the worst thing in the world, which is that Sunday feeling, and it's even worse when you've just when your parents just leave you, and then suddenly it was like pulling off a plaster. I didn't feel it after that. I was all right.
Yes, you didn't get homesickness.
Obviously, yes, but not in this. Not as badly as I thought. I just suddenly felt okay, and then obviously it's the first stage of all those things you've always planned in your bedroom, and hope you're going to get somewhere towards.
So, Mark, we also have a connetion. Well, very loosely, because my wife went to Bretton Hall.
No,
as well. Yeah,
I'm so sorry. What was she studying?
Drama.
You weren't sure then, were you?
I know, because there were lots of things.
There
were lots of things. There was arts and
music. Musical theatre, possibly. I think.
When was that?
She would have graduated in 2006.
Oh, a long time after me. It's gone now.
Yeah.
Has it?
Yeah, it became a police college, and now it's... I've just actually visited it. You can see it's about to become a hotel, because it's a lovely Georgian house in the grounds of the Yorkshire Sculpture Park. It'll be very pretty when it's done. But yes, it was quite melancholy. You can wander around the fence and look and see it's all overgrown, like me.
And what are your memories of Bretton Hall like then? Were they? Because obviously that's kind of where everything sort of started.
Well, yes, that's where I met the rest of the League of Gentlemen, and we have very fond, slightly sort of hysteria-tinged memories of it. To be absolutely frank, and it's all gone now, so that's all right. It was a pretty terrible course, but we did bond in adversity.
Terrible in what way? What, the tutors weren't very good?
I wouldn't like to say that. No, it was just, I don't know, it was run by this man called John Hodgson, who's gone now. And it was a bit of a sort of personal fiefdom, in that way that they can be. And I don't know, it's a bit like education in general. It has to be sort of fairly generalised, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But then the point of sort of going to a drama school was to learn some specific things, but we never really did. But what we did do was we ended up putting on our own stuff, and it was incredibly useful. It sounds a bit like the plot of a Cliff Richard film, but we did actually, just do loads of stuff, and as a result, when we left, we were quite sort of ready for that, for a sort of do-it-yourself feel to getting things on, and that proved very useful in our early days in the League of Gentlemen. So it was. I mean, we have brilliant memories and hilarious stories of various things, but they're all too specific now. But but it was an education, as they say.
But sometimes there is no substitute for just doing it. You know,
Oh,
yes, you can have training and stuff, but
yeah.
you got to get out there and do something.
And
at some point.
I think it is like education. I mean, very few people know what they ever want to do. My nephew, for instance, is now thinking of having gone to college and getting a first in sort of environmental sciences. Now wants to become a carpenter, and it's sort of taken him till he was 30 to really realise that. And now he thinks, "Oh, I wish I'd known that 20 years ago." But you don't.
Thing,
so there are things like that, and I think. Even with specific things like drama school, you go, well, okay, we're going to teach you 17th century Venetian dancing. And you go, I'm really good at this. And then you wait for the film to come, it never comes. But I think it's probably wiser to sort of learn it if you have to.
Yeah.
So I never learned that anyway.
But it was amazing that you made that connection with those guys. I mean, are you a believer in serendipity? I mean, obviously, you know...
it's a sliding door. I mean, thank God. I mean, it's terrifying, and there are so many versions of not meeting them, and who knows? I mean, weirdly, I always did know what I wanted to do, which was to write and to act, and I never thought I'd be able to make a living at it. So I was very blessed in the sense of always knowing that, and then getting it to come true. But you know, if you unpick all the stages that get you to a certain place, it's frightening how serendipitous it can be in one missed phone call or whatever. Who knows? So, but then that's a different podcast altogether. It's the alternative life story.
Good idea for a podcast.
Yes, it is. What would you be doing now? Sort of anti-desert island discs. My 8 least favourite record from my other life as a bin man. So yeah, gosh, it was. But it's that wonderful thing about when you meet people you become friends with, or you just get on straight away. There's a sort of shared history and a shared sort of take on the world. Really, that's what it is. I mean, there was a very early incident at Bretton Hall where we had to do what I will loosely call a mask workshop, which essentially involved like drawing some sort of face on a paper plate.
Oh, okay,
it's true. And sort of putting on, there was Steve Pemberton we were in the same year. Reese was the year below, and there was a guy called Gordon Anderson who later went on to direct Catherine Tate and The Inbetweeners and all kinds of things. And actually was the guy who sort of put us together as the League originally. Yeah. Bless him. And Gordon had drawn this very basic sort of smiley face on his plate, and I was just going, oh. And I just glanced over, and he was looking at me with his paper plate face, and somehow I could read his expression. You know what I mean? I thought, you are a friend.
Was it at that moment that you realised this may be not quite the best course?
Yeah, it was about I think it was day 2.
Okay.
Do you think there's, when you're going into the creative world and industry, but you're doing it as part of a group, there's almost that kind of solidarity and support there that isn't there maybe if you're going up to do stand-up comedy or something on your own? Do you think it's more helpful in those early stages?
Yes, I think it is, except in the same way you have to know your own mind. I mean, it's partly, the arrogance of youth or comparative youth, but it's very important that, I think, because it's so easy to get diverted and diluted. I remember what we did when we first got the League together. We sort of tried to do our sketches on the stand-up circuit, and it was disastrous because it just doesn't work. You need to have a sort of enshrined atmosphere, and you can't come off the back of someone doing observational comedy and then have 3 10-minute sketches. It didn't work. So we decided to kind of curate an evening, and so we got this residency at a place called the Canal Cafe Theatre in Little Venice, and it worked brilliantly. But we had and then we started to get people coming, and then a few producers came, radio producers and stuff like that. And I remember really early on how easily we could have been pushed to one side or another because. Quite learned people would say, I think it's marvellous, but the sketches are too long, they're too dark, you need a girl, you need a song, all these old-fashioned things, and you just think, well, we don't want to do that because people have done that, and yet, if you're on your own or if you feel slightly less sure of yourself, you might make those compromises and suddenly find you're trying to do something that everybody else has done. I mean, it's easy to say if it works. But it's true. You can be very easily diverted and distracted. And one thing we did, we sort of made a pact early on that we wouldn't get distracted from the project. So we knew several people in comedy who had, as soon as they had a little glimpse of success, one of them had gone off to do this and the other that and another that, and they lost focus on the main thing. And as a result, their big project, which was meant to be their show, sort of didn't quite happen and things like that, which I think is still very relevant, especially now I'm venerable these days of panel shows and stuff when that seems to be the only way to get on the telly. It's very easy to split your focus and think that's what I must be doing.
But it's hard when you're driven by, well, maybe not driven by, but when you've got pressures like need to make money, need to pay the rent and stuff, and yet you've got this passion that you're good at and you enjoy doing, and it might not be paying the bills yet, but it might be heading in the right direction for you or in a direction. It's difficult to kind of balance all that out.
Of course it is, and then you look at every biopic, including Bohemian Rhapsody, there's someone on the sidelines who nearly did it. The guy who left Queen, or what they were called, Smile, I think, then left because he got a job as a fitter or something. It could so easily be now. Tim Brooke Taylor was nearly in Monty Python.
Really?
And I so love the goodies of it, and he's got this amazing sort of different career, radio and everything. But being a Python is it's a different thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that in a way that's a slightly random selection of people who'd worked together on different things, and I always find that so fascinating. It's really scary the way that life could have turned out.
I don't think Tim Brooke Taylor would have been in like Life of Brian or something like that. It's funny, isn't it? I was thinking with League of Gentlemen as well, because obviously you've touched on it a little bit with saying that you went through these different stages. Was it always TV that you thought you would be headed to, or was every stage a sort of little surprise, or
I suppose the
way of doing it?
The aim was that. I mean, we started live because that's what we did. Yeah, and but the traditional route then, and it has changed a lot now, but the definite traditional route was radio and then TV. Yeah. So that was certainly, and we're all utterly obsessed with TV and grew up on every single aspect of 70s television. So it certainly felt like that was where we wanted to head, and that's what we should be doing. The radio series actually was incredibly useful, and I've said this before, but when we did the first radio series, and then we did the first TV series, and there was an actual thing at the BBC at the time which was meant to stop people from defecting. It was called buying media, so that the same team who had made the radio would actually make the TV shows. Very good idea. They should still do it. So we did that, and then we wanted to make a second radio series, and they didn't want it.
Oh.
And we literally said, "Oh, we'll just make another TV series then." It was so strange. We just won the BAFTA. It was like, "Shall we? Do you know? Okay." So we did, and we really wanted to do. And that,
did you ever find out why?
Yeah. We got a letter about 6 months later from the new head of comedy saying, "Oh, for Christ's sake, I'm so sorry," but it was too late. Yeah. We just, but it was really useful because we developed the idea of the town there, and we wrote things especially for radio, which actually then became TV characters and stuff like that. It was very useful and great fun, and also as a big fan of radio comedy, it was just amazing. Some of my happiest memories of the early days of the show are recording in the radio theatre, and it's an Art Deco delight, and you get a live audience, and you feel like you're in Itmar for half the time. It was marvellous.
And I guess writing for radio as well brings up different skills than writing for TV, so it makes you kind of look at comedy and what you're doing from slightly different angles.
Completely. I mean, you realise how much I mean, if I listen to it now, which I really do, but some of our best stuff isn't very well served by radio because some of the drama of it just sounds like dead air. I remember at the time thinking that we've nipped that pause up too much. It's a bit sort of hysterical things like Cave Guy and The Best Man speech, they're too squeezed.
Yeah.
You need a bit of space. And yet other things, Dr. Chinnery was developed for the radio because it was like a, you can do lots with exploding creatures in sound effects. That was very old-fashioned, really.
Yeah.
So I was looking through your Wikipedia.
Oh, God.
And aside from the fact that I've done so much stuff. I mean, you've worked so much and you seem very busy. But a lot of what you do is sort of macabre. That seems to be kind of almost your thing. Would you agree with that? And where did that kind of develop? Where did that come from?
My husband says I'm creepy. He says it all the time. I've just done it in a creepy voice. I can't help it. Yes,
you go around the house
God,
just say,
yes.
Middle of the night, wake him up.
Just looking creepy. I just sit in the corner,
just with a paper plate
in a rocking chair. Let me in. Yes, I mean it's absolutely. If you use that tired old expression, it's absolutely in my DNA. It is. It's just since I was tiny. First horror film I saw was Brides of Dracula. I was 4, wow. and it's a strange thing. It's a kind of like anything. It's like any palate. It changes through your life, and I used to be very bloodthirsty child and teenager. I'm much less so now. I still love horror, but I like different shades of it. Mm-hmm. Some of it I can't bear anymore, and I'm very squeamish. I love ghost stories. They're my favourite things. But it's more inflections, And I also think it's quite nice to go back to things that you venerated as a child and go, I don't like that anymore. It's quite liberating to not hang on to stuff. It's a bit like those decluttering manuals. You're allowed to do that. And also you're allowed, what's really exciting is to find something totally different. And so my macabre tastes are very much still there, but it's a different sort of version, different inflection. And I find I get it from different sources now. I don't know. These days I'm really into sort of post-war British thrillers, which aren't necessarily horror, but especially sort of murders and things. I love all that, and I think it goes very deep. That it's something the sort of films you used to watch when you're off school, and Talking Pictures TV, the greatest channel in the world, now is the only place you can see them. But something about that stable of brilliant character actors, and they're all odd. They're all odd films, they're really odd, very quirky, very British in a way that, now that the British film industry has become a sort of heritage thing, they really were very distinctively British. I think whatever we used to be is very much in those films, and I find that really attractive, and the kind of quirkiness of that, and they're often very funny and very black, So I think that's
they very sort of a time as well?
I guess so, but I suppose some of those things are transferable.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's been, 10 seconds and we haven't mentioned Brexit, so it won't be long. But I think, I was talking about this the other day, forgive me for darting about, but
no, it's fine.
I went to a thing the other day, which I've always wanted to go to, it was the 370th anniversary of the execution of Charles I. I'm very interested. I played him, and I'm firmly on Cromwell's side, but I find him a fascinating figure. Charles' massive contradictions. As a friend of mine said, a bad king with great taste. That's what he was. And, but I've always wanted to go to this. Every January the 30th, there's a service for him by the Society of St. Charles the Martyr, because he's a saint of the Anglican Church. And
is it well attended?
Well, it was January the 30th. It was a beautiful day like today, cold and crisp as it was when he was executed. And I thought, I'm going to go. So I did. Went down with a couple of friends to Whitehall, and we met outside the banqueting house. And there was a sort of commemoration. Then we went in for a full Anglican mass, which I eventually had to leave. Well, yes, I didn't get that far. It was so long. With relics, bells, amazing,
Incense.
I think actually no, it's proper costumes in a way that we've those of us brought up on anything kind of C of E never got. Yeah. But I was fascinated by it. And what it made me think was it's the sort of thing I used to love about Britain was these weird little eccentric corners. But now I worry that these little eccentric corners have become Britain. Do you know what I mean? And that we are we've become a sort of, as I said the other day in the Remainiacs thing, that we have weaponized nostalgia.
Yeah.
And it's a very dangerous thing. So although I still love the fact that we can do there are such things as the Society of St. Charles the Martyr and all these things. The things that used to be like the subject of a lovely documentary on a Sunday night have become the political mainstream. The fucking Flat Earth Society, which used to be a joke, a fun joke, is now believed by a quarter of the population, and it makes me spit blood.
Makes me weep.
Yes, makes me weep blood.
The Flat Earth Society had a post on their Facebook account saying we've got members all
Around
over
the globe.
It's amazing. But nostalgia is nostalgia for a reason, because it belongs in a certain time.
Well, the Elizabethans used to think it was an actual disease.
Really?
And I think that's where we are. I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah.
It's something. It's very, very seductive, but it's very dangerous. Yeah. And we are going through one of those periods at the moment where, which always happens, where there is a myth of a golden age. Mm-hmm. Our current golden age is not Queen Elizabeth I. Now, our current golden age essentially is the 50s, and it is that era of know your place, respect, Bobby's on the corner. Jumpers for goalposts. But irrational, with all these things. I mean, Joan Bakewell tweeted the other day brilliantly, because some fool was saying, as they're now doing, we can manage. We managed in the war, and we managed in the 50s. And Joan Bakewell said, I was there, rationing, TB, polio, diphtheria, fucking grow up.
Yeah.
And, but that's where we are. It's become, and I think people who didn't fight in the war now believe that they did by virtue of watching war films. That's worked for them.
Yeah. Do you think, not to obviously politicise the pod too much, or anything,
too late?
But true, very true. Doesn't history suggest when we're in moments like this that it does then come a bit full circle? And
it does, yes.
The next stage is actually really more progressive.
Absolutely, but unfortunately, the end of the circle tends not to end well.
No,
it usually ends in a big fight.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. That's what I'm genuinely frightened of. We feel like we are. It is absolutely. It's a convulsion. The world goes collectively crackers every now and then. Yeah. And as everything about where we are proves, I mean, we're in Churchill House, and it's very interesting how that argument has suddenly risen up, like all arguments at the moment, with no nuance whatsoever.
No, exactly,
But there's a sense of two dogs tearing lumps out of each other about every single bit of the political discourse, and it tends to end in a proper fight.
Yeah, and we've talked about this, haven't we, about this binary thing. Either this or you're that. And that's where we're at. Like you said, no nuance to anything, any argument.
Apart from this podcast.
Oh, yes, lots of nuance in this.
The Nuance podcast.
We come up with a lot of good ideas for pods, haven't we, in this? Better than our one, so... Brilliant.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, you're obviously very busy and you're doing lots of stuff all the time. I know you're obviously writing, you're acting, and you paint and you do your artwork. How do you find transitioning between those things? Do you give particular time to one at one moment, or are you doing lots of different things, juggling lots of balls?
I'm always juggling. I mean, it's nice
do you like that?
I do, except sometimes you get they do, you get in danger of dropping them. But I mean, at the moment, because we're doing Dracula pre-production, and I'm not acting at the moment. I did a radio play the other day, but I haven't got any plans for anything for the next few months because I just want to focus on that, and that's nice to be doing that and behind the camera and getting all that together. So that means I've got room to sort of quietly write other things, and I'm painting the next couple of days. I've got 2 days of lovely, blissful emptiness, so I'm going to do that. But I think some of it is like finding the time. Other times you have to sort of schedule it like work. It's like I'm terrible at holidays. I'd love more holidays, and I end up not having them because you need to go. No, I'm not available. I am going away. And I'm very bad at that, unfortunately. But it's really good for you. So in the same, this weekend I'm going. I want to paint and not really have anything else going on in my head, and think, right, I can definitely devote lots of hours to this.
So the painting's a bit of a release, is it?
Oh yeah, it's a hobby, really. I just and I love it, and I love trying to get better and learning stuff. I find that very exciting about it is, we all spend all our childhood trying to get away from school and learning stuff. Then it's very exciting if you do it voluntarily. And whatever it is, learning a language or reading books. I think everyone gets a sort of buzz from that. And I know a friend of mine was telling me the other day about pirates. This is amazing. Pirates are associated with eye patches, not because so many of them lost their eyes, but because a lot of them did wear them, because they would go up and down between decks so often that they needed one eye which was permanently adjusted to the dark. Isn't that brilliant?
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I thought, what is that? I mean, I love stuff like that. Yeah. And it was, he just read some great book on Anne Bonny or something. It's like, that's what you want. And I feel voraciously hungry for stuff like that. And I find it really exciting.
Yeah, that is excellent. Yeah, just those random little facts, little conversation fillery things. It's just a shame that learning stuff, as you're saying, like languages or anything like that, it's just so much harder once you're out of school.
It's always hard.
It's just.
I'd love to speak Italian. That's what I'd love to do. And I did try that Michelle Thomas thing, which is meant to be a sort of shortcut. And we were in Italy a couple of years ago, and I used to go running around the village with it on my headphones, and I thought, this is working. And, I can order a bottle of wine and whatever. And as soon as we came home, gone. Yeah, because the terrible lesson is you have to do the work.
There's no substitution for that. I'm guessing in those sort of downtimes for teamwork, you're quite good at that then, because if you've got your painting, you've got something to concentrate on. And we've spoken to previous creatives on this podcast about what do they do in those times when the work's not coming in or things aren't clicking. But it sounds like maybe you might have that kind of filled in.
I am a bit of a workaholic, I think. I find if I haven't done something in a day, I feel a bit itchy. But then I need to be able to go, that's all right.
Yeah.
But then weirdly, doing a drawing or something, I feel like I've created something, does scratch that itch. And I have found it very helpful in combating, the black dog, which I've never really had much trouble with, but until quite recently, the last few years, I've had a lot more spells of it. I think a lot to do with the state of the world, I'm afraid to say, because it does impinge. It really does.
So you feel like it's more the outside influences that are causing that.
I think your own
kind of neurosis.
I don't think so. I think I did an interview last Christmas or the Christmas before last, and I looked back at it. It was like it should just had the Samaritans number on the top of it. No. It was desperate, but I was. It really felt like, there was basically a sort of fascist putsch of the White House, and everything was going really wrong. It was like, I know this feels overwhelming, and I found my rediscovering drawing and painting has been a huge help to my head. I mean, it's just brilliant. It takes I totally lose track of time. Yeah. It's a very big thing for me to say, but I actually come back and realise I've left a cup of tea.
Wow,
that's
when you know.
Yeah, so which is brilliant. But God, I mean, I think whatever you have, find something like that.
Yeah,
to take you out of that realm of being overwhelmed, and obviously social media doesn't help because you feel you are permanently hardwired into that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And of course, as people have been saying for years, it's only bad news because there isn't a good news channel, that thing that Martin Lewis used to say. People mocked him for that. I think he was right.
Yeah.
Because there are incredibly great, wonderful things that happen. They never get any airtime. The discovery of a new antibiotic, incidentally, the only important thing, is like number 17 on a news. It's like this should be the one.
I saw a documentary about someone who tried to start a TV channel that was just puppies playing, which would be a great TV channel.
I'm sure that's already on.
Is it already on? I feel like I watched a whole documentary.
I'm just going to move my chair.
Yeah, because you're getting blinded.
And
by
I am indeed a vampire. That's all right.
Is that
Is that
better
even
or
better?
worse?
You can come
Do you want to come round? Yeah.
Yeah. Whoa. Oh, I like the socks. Very nice socks. Is that better?
That's better.
Quite. Oh, it's
Right.
bouncing off that window, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, right, is that better?
Is that
Yeah.
close? Yeah. I'm sure you're supposed to have engineers for this.
So you find digging into work can help with those moments then?
Yes, yeah, and I mean, I'm very lucky to be really very busy all the time. It's been a long time since I've had to wait for the phone to ring, largely because I create an awful lot of my own stuff. But you know, you get those periods, and I've recent years really suffered from the dark evenings in a way I never did as a child. I hated the summer. I used to find it so boring. And I love bonfire night, Halloween and Christmas and that whole thing. And then even into, January, February, I like the coldness and I still love the festive bits. But I find, as Robert Hardy says in The Stores of Barchester, I find I absolutely shrink from the dark evenings. And I really do. But so that having something like painting to do then has been incredibly helpful.
Yeah, because it's getting out of that dark spot, as you say.
Yeah.
The thing for me I get frustrated about is when those dark spots come, you lose so much time. You can spend hours. And then you think, well, I've just lost half a day. I'm such an idiot. But being able to jump out of it quickly by having something productive to do.
But then it is a vicious circle, isn't it? Because you can, if you get into a sort of what's the point mood, the last thing you need is for someone to say, snap out of it.
Yeah.
But also, it's very hard to pull yourself out of that, even though you know it's true, even though you think that's why all the old bloody pieces of advice are absolutely true. Yeah. Physical exercise, incredibly helpful. Yeah. Fresh air, doing something.
Yeah.
They all work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you feel, once you've done it, you feel like, oh, that wasn't too bad, actually. I can do this. Yeah. And then you feel like you might have been wasting time before that, and that's what frustrates me most. And again, having something productive, and maybe it's a creative thing, but having something you can look at afterwards and think, oh, I've done that.
Yeah.
I actually physically did that. Yeah. Because you've got to scratch that creative itch.
And also, if you have an unstructured life, an unstructured day, sort of imposing some kind of structure is really good. So if you feel, right, I've written 2 paragraphs today, or I've written 3,000 words, or I've done a drawing or something, you go, there it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And you think, well, that's the equivalent of me. I can have my lunch now.
I
feel all right.
Exactly.
And although what people always imagine is the great attraction of not having a 9 to 5, it's also it's a good problem to have. Yeah, but it is difficult because in a different way, because you need to have something. Yeah. You need to have something, otherwise you just never get out your pajamas.
Well, we're brought up to have structured lives. Yeah. You go through school and that's all structured, and you might have a job somewhere before you become a creative. That's structured. To then go to something that's not. Actually, I think your brain and your body is like, well, hang on, I'm not used to this. This isn't what I was told to do. So it is. I think you're right. Finding that structure. My wife's got a friend that is a freelancer, and she leaves her house in the morning, walks around the block, goes back in the house, and she's at work. And then at 9 a.m. and then at 5 p.m. leaves the house, walks back round the block, goes back in again. He's like, right, I'm home from work.
Wow.
And that's her tricking her brain into...
She's completely mad. Yeah. She sits in the park with a briefcase full of sandwiches.
But it works for her.
Yeah, that's good. That's true. I mean,
it works for you, I suppose. Yeah.
And it's like having an office that is actually 2 doors down or something like that. It's whatever it takes. I think that's the thing. Yeah. Everyone has a different thing, don't they? Different method.
Now, I mean, this podcast is about blank moments, and I wondered how you are in those moments when perhaps it's not working on the page, when you're writing, or, if you're not inspired to paint. How are you in those moments?
Oh, terrible. I mean, if you ever read a thing from anyone saying that there's no such thing as writer's block, or anything, it's such a lie. Yeah, dreadful. I mean, I've almost literally banged my head against the wall sometimes, just going. Well, there's a wonderful expression in Sherlock Holmes cudgeling my brains. You just go, come on!
Yeah.
Think of it, or what if it's some elusive thing, or just oh God, and it's dreadful. But then I suppose I've learned to not push it too far if it's not coming. Well, I don't know if you find this, but almost without exception, it's a day when I really, really could just do one thing. I'm at my desk at 9:15. I've been for a run. Dog's been taken out. It's a beautiful day, incredibly free. Nothing.
Yeah.
Somewhere around 11:45, you go, oh God, I'm going to watch a film.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you get something on a day when you've got 3 meetings and it's all bitty, and you go, oh, and then you try and claw your way back to a free day, and then when you get there, it happens again. So I think that's just the way it goes.
The nature of it, yeah.
But I've got good at. It's a bit like sketching, same way. It's like trying to. You can fit things in, and you can scribble things down in whatever form. I think that's very helpful. And then you don't feel like you've just not done it. But it's good to be kind to yourself, I think, and go, right, I know I will. For me, my method, I know I can do more in one good day than 6 days of fragments. Yeah. And sometimes I just say, well, it's not going to happen today. Give up on it. I've got too much admin. I've got too much stuff to do. Too much bittiness, You've got an appointment at the doctor's, and then you've got to go into London for something, and then and you go, oh, it's not going to work. Forget about it, and don't beat yourself up about it, I guess.
Yeah, being kind to yourself is a theme that comes up in this podcast a lot, actually.
It sounds like not a lot of us are doing it enough.
Yeah, very much, but it is important.
There should be a National Kindness Council.
They should.
There should be. We're coming up with some great ideas in this podcast. It's like a brainstorming session. It's absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say one of the things I was going to speak to you about was obviously you've worked on some huge behemoths, with regards to your TV work, and how you cope with that, really. I mean, obviously the League was a huge success, and then you've worked on projects like Sherlock and stuff. And is there an adjustment you have to make in your life to deal with that kind of stuff, or do you feel like you don't? It's fine. You're not. It's not affected you in any way.
No, it's a bit of both, to be frank. I mean, the League was our show, so we never had any expectation it would become a huge success. Thankfully, it did. But then you just go, well, it's our show, so we just did 3 anniversary episodes and the tour, and wonderful response.
Which was wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I saw you in Brighton. It was very good.
But you don't feel any obligation to. We're not going to suddenly just do a survey of what people want to see. You just have to do what you want.
Yeah.
Sherlock was a childhood dream come true for me and Stephen Moffat, and then it became this extraordinary success. But you have to just make what you want to make.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
We did. I mean, that's not to say we don't ignore things completely, because there were things like after we killed Sherlock, as Doyle had done before us, we were aware that in the 18-month gap, it became an international talking point. And we thought, well, we can't just say this is what happened.
Yeah.
So we had some fun with like fake beginnings and stuff, because it was like that's to some extent you take account of that, but you don't then just go through 300 million fan pages going, this is what because people demand things. People get very entitled, and that happens all the time with anything with any kind of following, really. Yeah. And it's a success problem. Yeah. You don't get it with things that people don't watch, but you just have to screen all that out. Doctor Who the same. I mean, I'm a lifelong fan. It's my favourite show since I was tiny, and then working on it was amazing. But it's very much about trying to work on a new show for a new audience who would be nostalgic for their era, and you can't be totally locked into the prison of the past. Otherwise, you might as well. You're just doing endless pastiches of what you grew up with.
Well, I was going to say those. I mean, like you're obviously into horror and Sherlock and Doctor Who, all things that have got a huge fan base already. Is that tricky, dealing with a fan base that's locked in and wants a certain thing out of those?
Well, it's a bit like social media in a way that you can look at it or not.
Yeah.
You also, I often think when you see some sort of massive Twitter spat, and you think, well, if one of those people wasn't on here, they'd never know.
No,
they would literally never know unless someone took the trouble to write them a letter, and they'd go,
Yeah.
and you can get that massively out of proportion. You thinking the world is thinking this, or this is some sort of massive. It's not. And I often found that with Sherlock, people get quite heated about opinions on certain things and certain issues, and then you just bump into someone and says, "Oh, are you doing any more Sherlock? I like that show."
Yeah.
That's all it comes down to.
Yeah.
And so you've got to try and get it proportionate, I think. And obviously with fan bases, we're all fans of something. I'm a huge fan of lots of things, but and I know that feeling. But at the same time, I think what everyone respects is the desire to push things forward, and also give you different versions. The best aspect of it all, I think, is a sort of healthy embracing of different types of things. So, weirdly, Sherlock came out of a conversation years ago that Steve and I had on a train about updating it. And, the Basil Rathbone films were updated, and it was heretical, but it was wonderful. And we thought, well, we could do it again. And I had been invited to address the Sherlock Holmes Society of London, the House of Parliament, and I was amazed at how completely embracing of the idea they were. You'd expect them to be sort of fog-bound and fossilised.
Yeah.
They thought, they loved it. I thought, well, we really took sort of inspiration from that. It was like, well, why not? And to me, it's like that you see those sort of deadly arguments in the papers about an all-female Julius Caesar, and you think, for Christ's sake, there'll be another one in 10 minutes. Shakespeare's play is not going to be burned by this. So why don't you just see?
Yeah, embrace it. You might actually like it.
Well, what's life if we can't evolve and we can't try things differently?
Brexit.
Exactly. Well, that's that question.
It's 2019. That's what.
Do you put a pressure on yourself when you're working on something like Doctor Who that you were such a big fan of, and then you're working on it? Is there pressure from within?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, in the sense of, well, you have your favourite stories and think, I wanted people.
Well, I was going to say, were you writing?
Yeah.
Do you turn it on yourself? Like, am I writing this for me?
Yeah.
Because I'm a fan. I want it to be like I want it to be, or are you writing it for the fans, or are you just writing?
Well, no. I mean, I wrote on it for 10 years, and it was always about the new Doctor, and obviously, I mean, every single one of my scripts has some sort of inflection of my childhood, because I brought back the Ice Warriors I always loved, and I was thrilled to do that. But I also did lots of new monsters, and I thought that's what it's about that. And I think in the best way to de-weaponize nostalgia, a little drip of this. Yeah. Every now and then is pleasing.
Yeah,
it's when it becomes, the fan mentality in all kinds of shades of fandom can be very, very blinkered, and it's like, no, you must do this because someone said it in an episode in 1968.
Yeah,
and you go, well, most of the people watching have not seen the show.
Yeah,
they've seen it since 2005, say, and I find that, you don't want to sort of stick two fingers up at it, but at the same time, you want to have a healthy disrespect for it, because everybody has over the years, and that goes for Sherlock Holmes, Doctor Who, Marvel, everything. I think.
Sure, yeah.
So I think you've got to just keep it in perspective, and then just say, well, this is my version. If you like it, great, and maybe one day you'll do your version.
Yeah,
but also you're being true to yourself. As a writer and a creator, you're doing what you believe in and what you think works for you. And then, as you say, you put it out there and you see what the world says.
Yeah. And then you lock the door and weep.
And delete Twitter.
Yes.
Yeah, we'd be a lot helpful if we did that. Do you find the writing is easier because you're an actor as well? Does that help?
Writing is not easy.
No, I know that.
No, that should be written above every.
Yeah, it's one of the hardest things.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Yes, in the sense of I've always liked kind of characterizing I speak things out loud, and I sometimes I write for certain actors, living or dead. If you know what I mean, like type. You go, oh, that's a James Mason type character or something like that, and so that's very useful. And I suppose having a sort of ear for dialogue, that's been very useful. But I think it's like anything, you just try and do it more and get better at it, don't you? And I would, even in my busy schedule, there are times when I wish I could quietly say, "Oh, I've written a book," and I don't know when this would happen. It's like some sort of Harry Potter thing. Like if somehow or other I just found 5 minutes a day to write something that nobody knew about, that would please me enormously. And sometimes I feel like that would be a good thing to try and do, you know. But again, it's about scheduling the time, isn't it? I'm just reading this wonderful biography of Bram Stoker, actually, and he was astonishingly hardworking. I think he basically worked himself to death, but it's almost difficult to understand how he did it. He was working on a newspaper in Dublin and writing about 10 reviews a week. Sometimes he'd re-review a show, and he had a full-time civil service job. Wow. And he must have been writing it at work, you know. But even so, it's like, God, how did he do all this stuff? But I think sometimes it's, you know, people have a passion. He was desperate to work.
Compulsion.
Yeah,
as well.
he was desperate to work in the theatre, and he was desperate not to be a civil servant.
Yeah.
Therefore, and you read these. I mean, I was reading about someone like, wasn't Victor Hugo, but someone like him would get up at like 5 and write 4,000 words, and then go to work, come back and do it, and they just had to, because that was, you know. And I suppose to some extent, if you are doing it for a living, that compulsion slightly leeches away. In fact, what I do between 5 and 9 is have my breakfast.
Exactly.
Watch telly.
Research is what I do. Research.
Yeah. So would you like to write a book? Is that an ambition?
I have written, but I haven't done them for years because they're very hard. And I love writing scripts because there's an immediacy to them, and not always, but quite often, but I get them made quite quickly, which I also like, because you feel, you know, often thinking about that. I've had friends who have worked on films for literally years. Steve Moffat and I were talking about this the other day. If we'd done the first Sherlock as a movie, we could easily still be living with that script now 10 years later. Wow. And the idea of that is like horrifying. I mean, whatever you liked about it, you'd loathe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I do like this sort of immediacy of that. Yeah. But I also like, having written a book. That's the nice bit. Not writing it. And I would like to sort of quietly write something else. I don't know what it is, but I've got a few ideas. But I don't know how you feel. But it's just much more labour intensive. I find the actual work.
Yeah, I wrote a novel. I've written a couple of novels recently, and it is. Yeah, it's months and months of work. And it's finding time around the other things that you're doing. And it can be very emotive as well. I mean, I found writing books very emotive, and that can take it out of you as well. Yeah.
So I suppose, there's just something much more immediate about scripts, which is a very nice place to be.
It's nice having the tangible evidence of something you've done just without doing the work. Just have it there. Click your fingers here, it arrives. So obviously you're a multifaceted performer, and you've done stage and screen and writing. Have you had many blank moments while performing, while on stage or on the screen? And can you remember sort of how you worked through them?
Funnily enough, I was playing Charles I. It was a play called 55 Days by Howard Brenton, directed by the brilliant Howard Davis. And I loved everything about it. I was so thrilled to be asked. I'd always wanted to play Charles I. Douglas Henschel was Cromwell. I thought it was a terrific play, went down very well. And then the second or third night in the trial, I suddenly realised I was having the time of my life. I thought, this is what it's supposed to be about. I'm really enjoying myself. Oh my God, it's me. That was what I went through my head, and everyone looked at me. Not a clue what I was supposed to say. The line actually was, remember. Remember, I am your king. And And I was so apologetic. No, everyone was fine and lovely about it, but it was only seconds, I suppose, when it felt like a lifetime. But it's awful because I think, well, I made the mistake of enjoying myself. Isn't that the fuck we're supposed to be doing? Oh, God. I mean, everyone has, like, dries or anything like that. It's more... I think it's more of a problem if you actually get the fear, which also is a big thing, actual stage fright. And I've seen that happen, and I've experienced it a bit myself, but it's more than a blank. I think that's the sort of I'd rather die than do this.
Yeah.
People run away. There's a famous story. I won't name anyone involved. This actor who was in tech, and they were about to open. I think the opening that night, and they came back from lunch, and his costume was just—he didn't turn up on stage. They went to his dressing room, and his costume was just carefully laid out, and he just fled.
Wow!
Just couldn't do it, and that does happen to actors who've been doing it for donkeys.
Yeah.
They suddenly get the fear, and that must be just dreadful because you think, well, I used to be fine. What's the matter? You know. I think it's worse as you get older. Because
really?
I think you're fearless. You're fearless about everything when you're younger, and you hurl yourself into things, and then you start to worry more about every little bit of it, and then you suddenly can't get out of the house anymore.
But a lot of that stuff almost isn't worth worrying about, really. You know.
Yeah, but it's the same thing. It's irrational, like any terror like that. You know, what's the worst that can happen?
And you build it up.
Exactly.
I suppose. You build it up, and
and it becomes bigger than it really is.
And then you do self-sabotage. Then you make it happen. I think.
Exactly.
But thankfully, touch wood, few and far between. But we'll see.
Yeah. And do you have any advice then for people that might have blank moments? We've talked about quite a few about writing and performing, because we have a lot of people that listen to this podcast. I think that do various careers and industries, some creative, some not. We like to end by asking our guests for their sort of advice, really.
I think you should. There's no point in sort of generalised advice, I think, about almost anything, because everyone's life and career is so different. If you can say anything, I think it's that you should try and mine what you do for something that gives you a different kind of pleasure, different kind of hit. So if you get a total, uninspired day or a blank moment, then maybe something parallel to it is the way to go. That's what I find about painting. It's still a creative thing, but it's totally these are a different part of my
outlet,
brain.
Isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a creative thing. If even in a non-creative job, maybe that's what you're actually seeking, or maybe it's just a simple thing as going for a walk. And this sounds like self-medication, doesn't it? But I think a lot of these things are actually at root very simple, and we all know how much it helps to unburden yourself to a friend or a stranger, usually a stranger, because you don't have any stakes in it. Yeah. But just getting those things out there, it suddenly becomes a lot more in perspective. You think, what on earth was I so worried about? And if it's an actual creative block, I think, as I say, something along the same but different lines can get you out of it. I find writing that you get stuck on a thing and then you just go, well, I'm not going to think about it because it's not happening. And then I'll go and, try and talk to someone, Steve Moffat probably, and we'll sit down and so the thing I've been, and it's like that. It's almost just like being in the room with someone. You suddenly, that's all right now. Oh no, or some sort of to and fro, or just having a cup of tea and thinking about it. And not, I think if you push it too hard, it breaks. Yeah, that's the thing. And you should, again, it's about being kind to yourself and letting these things percolate. And my great luxury is long baths. I love baths.
Same.
And I call them think baths because I really do. I fall asleep, but I do think a lot about stories and things in the bath because something between the warmth and the relaxation. I think, you just let something run a bit, and that tends to help me. But as I say, it's all individual, isn't it?
Oh, I'm definitely going to do longer baths. Mark Gatiss told me take longer baths.
It's in Madox.
That's my only advice. Yeah. Take longer baths. Take more baths.
Take more baths. Take longer baths.
Well, I was going to suggest that to you anyway.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well,
Mark Gatiss.
Yeah, so that was very simultaneous.
That was beautiful.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming on the
Pleasure.
podcast. Well, there we go. That was Mark Gatiss on the Blank Podcast.
It was. What a brilliant guest.
Oh, fantastic. I know I don't want to keep saying it every week because I was just like a broken record. But again, another great guest that we were able to sit down with for an hour and chew the fat with.
Yeah.
About Blank.
I thought it was really interesting talking about using the painting as a way of dealing with those blank moments, essentially.
Yeah, sort of funneling your
yeah.
blankness into other things.
Or the creative stuff,
yeah.
and actually still coming out with something tangible you've done and feeling proactive.
Yeah,
even when actually
yeah.
the main thing you were trying to do is put to one side for a bit.
Well, and also he sort of talked about how often when he is busy doing other things, that's when the stuff he's been kind of toying with in his brain, and that's maybe a bit fuzzy when he's got time to do it. He's able to actually start working on stuff.
Yeah,
so,
I think that's a really sort of good use of your time.
Yeah, and actually goes back. Do you know what goes back to our first episode with John Monson, who talked about how he works on several different...
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
That's funny how these things go back around, isn't it? But works on several different projects at a time to help to stop those blank moments.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it's interesting how, we're starting to see... I mean, actually, there has been a continuity through all the episodes of different ways of dealing with stuff. But, yeah, certainly that's kind of come back from a full circle.
There you go. Yeah. Good. Well, that was fascinating. Thank you so much to Mark for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. And we hope you enjoyed it as well. Now, as ever, you can get in contact with us on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. It's all the same handle. It is...
At blankpod.
It is indeed. And I believe you've got a tweet for us.
I've got a tweet from Jodie who said she's been listening to the Blank Pod for the first time this morning on her commute. And she was listening to the Susie Dent episode, which she said was very delightful, especially learning an old word, complicity, which sums up her general demeanour. So if you want to know what complicity means, you will have to listen to episode 4 of the Blank Podcast with Susie Dent.
Just Google it.
No, listen to the Blank Podcast. Jim, that's not how we promote our show.
Well, thank you for that message. That's a lovely tweet. We get some very nice tweets.
We do.
We're very lucky.
Please keep them coming because it's really nice. And you will get read out if you send us a tweet. So we're going to try and do that every week.
Yeah,
now.
read out some
tweets.
But it's just nice. We seem to be cultivating a really nice, friendly following on social media, which is lovely.
We've got a really good bunch of people that are tuning in every week, and that's it's really pleasing to know about.
It is indeed. So thank you very much. You can also email us if you want to. Our email is hello@theblankpodcast.com. And please subscribe. If this is the first time you're listening to us, hit that subscribe button and the Blank Podcast will be in your folder app. I sound like an old man then. In your podcast app every Wednesday morning. And we've got another guest next Wednesday, of course.
We have. I'm really looking forward to it.
It's going to be a good one.
Yeah,
they all are. Yeah, we say it every week, but it's true.
They're only good because of our guests, though, I have to say.
Yeah, we just sit here and just listen and just marvel at them. How do we get this person in the room?
Yeah, well, it's mainly, how have they agreed to do this? Yeah. And actually, do they know what they're dealing with when they meet us?
Exactly. It seems to go all right.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much for listening. Have a great week. We'll see you again next week on the Blank Podcast.